Hello, I'm Holly, and obviously I run this channel. For those of you who don't know how this works, this is not my personal story or even someone that I know. It was anonymously submitted to me, and I'm just sharing it. So just to clarify, these are their words, not mine. This also serves as a trigger warning. I will be talking about mental illness, suicidal thoughts, drugs, medications, facilities, things of that sort. So if you're sensitive to those topics, then this might not be the story time for you. This story is sensitive, so be kind to both the writer and to me. This is my first one, so bear with me. To make the storytelling easier, I used a random name generator, and I got the name Sierra. So I will be calling this person Sierra, just for reference. Let's get into it. So Sierra's story starts when she was 6. She was diagnosed with ADHD, and this is when her parents started to take her to doctors and places to be diagnosed and treated for it. So they were also doing a bunch of testing, and the testing wasn't necessarily inhumane or terribly cruel or anything like that, but without giving away Sarah's age, she is a bit older, meaning she's just out of school. So when she was going through this at 6 years old, at the time, the mental health field was just not as developed as it is today. There was still a lot of ignorance among it, even with doctors, and there was still a stigma on mentally ill people. Even with the doctorate community, 3 of Sierra's disorders were not even discovered yet. They didn't even exist. So without going into too much detail, the testing done on Sierra at 6 years old was long, extensive, and terrifying. Fast forward to Sierra's freshman year of high school. She was at this time diagnosed with depression, anxiety, ADHD, and sociopathic tendencies, which she says was completely wrong at that point, but she was put on medication for all of it. Not only medication, but also different treatments for it. So at this point, Sierra kind of started to spiral. She started dating this boy who was dealing drugs, and she eventually started to deal for him and help him out, and she enjoyed that because it gave her freedom from her parents. Sierra's parents loved her very much, but it's just that she was adopted, so her parents were a bit older, and it wasn't like they were abusive or anything. They wanted the best for her, but they were just very strict, and it got to be pretty suffocating for Sierra. So anyways, this boy that she was seeing was on house arrest, so he started to have her drive his car and go on these drug deals for him. So unfortunately, this boy that she was seeing and drug dealing for / with, he ended up becoming her rapist. So at this point, it's a little before winter break of her freshman year. Her parents basically decided that they needed to take bigger steps towards getting her better treatment. Just to include Sierra's state at this point, she was regularly self-harming, she was abusing drugs, and had even attempted suicide multiple times. On top of all of that, she was becoming pretty violent in general, so that's just another thing on top of everything else. So Sierra's parents decided to send her to what they called a boarding school / treatment center, but Sierra says that it was not a boarding school, it was an asylum. And yes, asylums do still exist, but they just don't call them that anymore. Sierra says that today's asylums are very good at hiding, meaning they're not openly aggressive or neglectful or violent or anything like that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all sunshine and rainbows and that they're still perfect. They use a form of therapy that they refuse to put a name to, and Sierra doesn't go into great detail on what actually went on during this therapy, but she basically just says that it wasn't good, at least for her. So you can refuse to participate in any therapy activity or even take your medications, but if you do, there will be consequences, non-violent of course, but they get to choose those consequences on their terms. Most of the time, if you refused, you would get put on study time or put on sick bed, which means that you just get locked in your room with a cold can of soup for the whole day. Or you can refocus, which means that you're locked in a stone cell for however long they feel is necessary. So there are 2 ways to actually get out of this place. One, you can do something called phase out, which means you meet and surpass every standard for mentally stable people. Or you can wait until you're 18 and sign yourself out. But keep in mind, Sierra is a freshman in high school at this point, so I think she'd be around 14, so that'd be waiting like 4 years to get out of this place. Sierra says that straitjackets, padded rooms, and shock therapy all do still exist, and she was put through all of them. Again, she doesn't go into much detail, but she just expresses how mentally confining this place was, and basically how it just was not helping her. Halfway through her stay, her room neighbor had unfortunately committed suicide. So that was just like another thing that this place was just mentally confining to the max for Sierra. It wasn't really likely that she was going to phase out, and she refused to wait that long until she turned 18 to sign herself out. So she just played along, did the therapy, took her medications, and just did everything that they told her to do. She even describes it in her own words as playing the game they put her in. Looking back now, Sierra realizes that they put her through something called memory enhancement therapy. And according to her, she says that basically it changed the way that she remembered her own life so that she would believe that it was all her fault and that she had to take the pills, had to go to therapy, get all this treatment, basically play along so that she could be fixed and become a functional member of society. So a year later, she would be around 15, I guess, by now, but she managed to phase out of the program, meaning she got to leave. But she left the place taking over 10 medications daily. She successfully went through the rest of high school at a new high school without making a single friend, and she says she did that on purpose because she figured that if she wasn't involved with anyone, then they couldn't ruin the freedom that she basically scratched and begged for. She dated a boy for 3 years just to please her parents. She took all the pills. She gained over 80 pounds because of them. Basically, just completely lost sight of who she was and what she actually believed in. So fast forward to college, and this is where she says everything changed. In a twisted way, everything kind of came full circle. She ended up meeting a boy who sold drugs, and she ended up helping him sell drugs. But this time, it was different, and I'll explain why. A little bit about his backstory. He began selling marijuana at a young age, basically to help his parents because they were struggling financially, and he didn't want to have to ask for anything, and he also wanted to help them out at the same time. Sierra describes him as caring and gentle, and he actually cared for her and loved her and wanted what was best for her. He completely changed her life for the better and basically helped find herself again. PSA. So I'm going to read this passage directly from the submission because I want it to be Sierra's words and not mine. I don't want to try to summarize this. She says, "I don't think I need to go into detail on the dangers of dealing. No, dealing in gang activity is not fun or a lifestyle choice. It's dangerous, and most people who believe they could handle the potential consequences you sign up for when you sell or buy or initiate are very, very wrong. I don't say that as an insult. I'm not saying you aren't tough enough or too weak. It's a good thing to not have what it takes. It's a good thing to not be able to hold your own in a fight, to not know that if you got shorted, it's true that ignorance is bliss and safe. Safe in all caps. Please don't take this as me glorifying selling drugs or gangs or guns or any of that. I've lost too many people close to me to the streets to be stupid enough for that. This is real." I think that speaks for itself. She's not promoting selling drugs or anything like that. You get the point. So back to the story. She says that being in something real for the first time in her life basically snapped her back into reality. She actually missed her medications for a week and started to have withdrawals. She cried to this boy a lot because she was having strange thoughts about the way she viewed the world, about her past, and she basically just didn't know if she wanted to go back on her medication because she knew that it just kind of put her in this haze. Word for word, she calls it a safe medicated haze. Her true memories started to come back, and she doesn't go into detail about what those actually are. But this boy she was with, who actually cared for her, said that she should do what's best for her, not what her parents think. He also told Sierra that she needed to learn to love herself, not in spite of her mental illness or mental issues, but including them. So she quit her meds. It was scary at first, but Sierra did end up finding herself again. And she even quit her old therapist. She found one that she actually truly related to and loved. He correctly re-diagnosed her with borderline personality disorder and intermittent explosive disorder, both are which technically untreatable by meds, only by therapy. Sierra says that the pills they had put her on all these years were kind of no good and helped nothing. Her parents were obviously not happy. They took her car, quit paying for college, took the rest of her money away. Like, they just basically cut her off. Sierra says, but luckily she was dating this boy who was dealing drugs and that could support her, and she was also very good at dealing. She goes on to say that she learned to use her disorders to her advantage, and I don't mean like manipulating people or anything like that, but she found people like her and was able to help them. On top of that, the guy she was with was not only like helping support her, even though she didn't need it, she could support herself at this point, but he was always by her side, always supported her, cared for her, and loved her. Fast forward to a year later, which I assume is around this time, she is still completely medication-free and doing really well. And I'm also going to read this section word for word just because she says it so much better than I could. I learned that no amount of medication or forced therapy will help you. You have to decide for yourself that you want to feel better. Not get better, but feel better. There's nothing wrong with mentally ill people. Just as we can't help the body we're born in, we can't help the brains we're given or the trauma we've been through. My story and journey isn't over, but it began the first day I decided whether or not I wanted to take the pills for myself, not to please others. End quote. Sierra wants to clarify that she is not a danger to others. She stopped dealing, and so did her boyfriend, and they're learning, growing together, doing great. She has a stable job. She's doing great. Her parents are actually proud of her at this point because she's succeeding despite what everyone else told her, because her whole life she was told that she was wrong. Even her parents were telling her that. But they are super proud of her for sticking to what she felt was best for herself. She is a functional and valuable member of society, even though everyone told her she couldn't be without medication or certain treatments or therapy. She ends by saying that you don't always need the pills or the treatment that is forced upon you. And the key word is forced. Sierra's not anti-meds or anything like that. She even clarifies that this is not a statement saying all meds are bad. All I'm saying is that no one should ever feel pressured into treatment. Having read this, it's just very clear that she was never given the chance to give her own opinion about her own treatment. And I believe if she did, she was told that she was wrong. And her message is just that she understands that people were trying to help her, but this whole time, while she was being forced into treatment, she had never made the decision for herself to get better. And that had a lot to do with her actually getting to this point where she feels stable and successful. And I'm going to end with her direct words because, again, she ends it so much better than I could, and this is her story. Begin quote. My final statement. Love yourself, not in spite of your flaws, at the least including them. Hopefully everyone will learn to love themselves because of their flaws. Normal is a concept, and there's nothing wrong with people who are mentally ill. We just need a little more time to grow. With love and hope for the prosperity of my brothers and sisters and non-binary mentally ill family. Sierra.